Rylee Goodrich and Anthony Barajas were two young people who chose the movies for their first date. During the film, Rylee texted her mother, saying the movie was boring but that she was enjoying the date because of Anthony's company. After that, Rylee didn't send any more messages to her mother. When the movie ended and the theater lights came on, an employee went in to clean and found the bodies of Rylee and Anthony. Rylee Goodrich was born and raised in Corona, a city in California with a population of just over 150,000. She was very popular in school. Not only was she a cheerleader, but she also played volleyball and had many friends. Those close to Rylee described her as a fun, outgoing girl who made friends easily. After graduating high school, Rylee earned a scholarship to Grand Canyon University. This university is located in Phoenix, Arizona, so Rylee had to move to begin her studies. However, she visited her family whenever she could. At the end of 2021, Rylee completed her first year of college and returned to Corona for the holiday season. On July 4th, Independence Day in the United States, her friends decided to throw a big party. There, Rylee met a young man named Anthony Barajas, who was a year older than her. Anthony Michael Barajas was born on August 9, 2001. He was the son of Brian and Catherine Barajas. From a very young age, Anthony's family noticed that he had a special gift for communication. He could talk to anyone about almost any topic. His parents said he had a level of maturity and self-confidence far beyond his age. At school, Anthony was described as an excellent student and a great athlete. In addition to playing soccer regularly, he also practiced martial arts. Anthony was very popular on TikTok. He created an account on the platform in 2019 and posted various comedy videos. Over time, his videos began attracting public attention, and within 2 years, he had nearly 1 million followers. Anthony was also very active on Instagram, where he frequently shared posts about his daily life. He wasn't entirely sure what he wanted to do in the future. He considered continuing to work on the internet, but sometimes he thought about pursuing something different. At the 4th of July party, Anthony and Rylee talked a lot and liked each other. They exchanged contacts and kept talking in the following days. After chatting for a while through social media, Rylee and Anthony arranged their first date. Even though Rylee was already over 18, she thought it was best for her parents to meet Anthony first to see if they would approve of a possible relationship. Rylee was very close to her parents, and their approval was extremely important to her. When her father met Anthony, he wasn't very impressed, especially because Anthony worked by making videos for the internet. At first, Anthony didn't leave a good impression on him. However, as they got to know each other, Rylee's father changed his mind and eventually approved of his daughter's choice. Anthony was polite and had excellent communication skills. On July 26th, Rylee and Anthony planned to go to the Regal Edwards Theater in Corona to watch The Forever Purge. Most of you are probably familiar with this movie, but for those who aren't, it's set in a dystopian world where, once a year, all crimes in the United States are legal for 12 hours. Before heading straight to the theater, the young couple decided to stop for a meal at Rylee's favorite restaurant, which was near her home. They had no idea that would be their last meal. After finishing dinner, Rylee and Anthony went straight to the movie theater. This was around 9 p.m., and the screening was scheduled to start at 9:30 p.m. and end close to midnight. Since it was a weekday, the theater wasn't very crowded. Only 6 tickets had been sold for The Forever Purge. 2 of these belonged to Rylee and Anthony. The other 4 tickets were purchased by a group of friends. Everything seemed normal. The young couple, excited for their date, entered the theater, and the movie started. Sometime later, during the film, Rylee texted her mother, saying that the movie was a bit boring but that she was still enjoying the date with Anthony. After that, Rylee never sent another message to her mother. At the end of the screening, the theater lights came on, and an employee entered the room to clean. He was surprised to see that Rylee and Anthony were still there. From a distance, it looked like they were just sitting or had fallen asleep in their seats, but as he got closer, he was shocked. Rylee and Anthony were gravely injured. Both had gunshot wounds to the head, and there was a lot of blood at the scene. The employee immediately alerted the other staff members, who quickly called 911. Within minutes, paramedics and police officers arrived. Right away, the paramedics confirmed that Rylee was already dead, while Anthony was still alive but in critical condition and unconscious. He was rushed to the local hospital, where he was placed on life support. The young couple's families were notified as soon as the police identified them. They rushed to the hospital and spoke with the officers to provide any information that might help with the investigation. The detective's starting point was the movie theater itself. The gunshot wounds to Rylee and Anthony's heads confirmed that they had been shot. At first, investigators considered the possibility that one of them had shot the other before turning the gun on themselves. However, no weapon was found at the scene, and neither victim had any gunpowder residue on their hands. Additionally, Rylee's wallet was missing, suggesting that whoever committed the crime had taken it. With this, the initial theory was quickly ruled out. Typically, an investigation would involve collecting DNA and fingerprints from the crime scene to identify the perpetrator. But in a movie theater, this was nearly impossible due to the high number of visitors. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of DNA traces and fingerprints. Because of this, detectives had to take a different approach. As the police worked to identify the person behind this brutal crime, the tragic story of Rylee and Anthony reached the media and quickly gained attention. The case was widely reported, and the news spread rapidly across California. Many people were shocked and wondered how something like this could happen in a movie theater without anyone noticing. In fact, some reports from that time mentioned that people became afraid to go to the movies, fearing that something similar could happen to them. That fear was understandable, as the killer was still at large, meaning they could strike again. It didn't take long for news of the crime to spread beyond California. Soon, the entire United States knew what had happened to the young couple. The media couldn't do much to help, as there wasn't even a suspect sketch at that point. All they could do was report on the crime. Back to the investigation, detectives spoke with all the theater employees. That's how they discovered that only 6 tickets had been sold for that screening. This was a positive lead because, with 2 tickets belonging to Rylee and Anthony, only 4 other people were on the suspect list. Police theorized that perhaps all 4 were involved in the crime. That's because it would have been nearly impossible for none of them to hear the sound of 2 gunshots inside the closed environment of a movie theater. Officers assumed that if only 1 or 2 of them were responsible, the others would have heard the gunshots and alerted the theater staff. However, police later realized that the movie playing at the time was a violent film with many loud action scenes featuring gunfire. The shooter could have easily taken advantage of one of those moments to fire the shots without drawing attention. This didn't rule out the possibility that all 4 were involved, but it did explain why, if they were innocent, they might not have noticed the gunfire due to the movie's noise. Detectives tried to gather more information about these 4 individuals from theater employees. But since IDs weren't required for ticket purchases, police only had a physical description. According to sources, the suspects were 4 young men who appeared to be of Hispanic descent and seemed to be together as a group of friends. With this information in hand, the police worked hard to track down these 4 individuals. Later, they received multiple anonymous tips, which led them to an address on Envoy Street in El Oro. A police team quickly went to the location, where they found a trailer. Inside was a young man named Joseph Jimenez. Junior officers questioned Joseph, but his answers were incoherent. During a search of the trailer, police found a firearm and Rylee Goodrich's wallet. Joseph was immediately arrested, and the gun was seized. Officers noticed that the weapon was the same caliber as the one used in the attack on Rylee and Anthony. They sent the gun for forensic testing, and ballistics confirmed it was the exact weapon used in the crime. Even when confronted with this evidence, Joseph denied any involvement. A background check revealed that he had no prior criminal record. Later, police were able to identify and locate the other 3 young men who had been at the theater with Joseph Jimenez. When questioned, they confirmed they were friends but denied any involvement in the crime. According to them, Joseph had been acting very strangely in the hours leading up to the movie. They said Joseph was mumbling and talking to himself, almost as if he were out of his mind. After purchasing their tickets, the 4 friends entered the theater and took their seats. Joseph continued acting strangely, talking to himself, and even shouting at times. At one point during the movie, Joseph told his friends he needed to go to the bathroom. However, instead of going to the restroom, he went to his car in the parking lot and retrieved a box. Joseph returned to the theater holding the box and sat back down next to his friends. When they asked him what was inside, Joseph replied that it was a gun. At first, they thought he was joking, but his continued strange behavior made them uneasy. Fearing for their safety, the 3 friends told Joseph they were going to the restroom and would be back soon. In reality, they were too scared to stay and decided to leave. They later told the police they had no idea what Joseph intended to do with the gun, but they were too frightened to confront him. They considered trying to convince him to leave, but they were afraid that if he got upset, he might shoot them. After Joseph's friends left, only he, Rylee, and Anthony remained in the theater. At some point during the movie, Joseph stood up from his seat and walked toward the young couple. Rylee and Anthony didn't realize Joseph was heading toward them since they were seated in a row in front of the one where Joseph and his friends had sat. As he approached, Joseph pointed the gun at the back of Rylee's head and fired. Rylee didn't have time to react. According to medical experts, she died instantly. Hearing the gunshot, Anthony lifted his head above the seat and looked back. At that moment, Joseph fired again, this time hitting Anthony in the eye. Afterward, Joseph put the gun back in the box, stole Rylee's wallet, and ran out of the theater. He went to the parking lot, got into his car, and fled the scene. According to the police, Joseph did not know the victims, and the attack was a senseless and deliberate act. Due to Joseph's strange behavior, as reported by his friends on the day of the crime, authorities speculated that he might have a mental disorder or was under the influence of a psychoactive substance. In a later statement, Joseph confessed to the crime but claimed he suffered from schizophrenia. According to Joseph, on the day of the crime, he had been hearing voices from someone he referred to as Abigail. Joseph mentioned that he hadn't been taking his medication for several days because he was unable to buy it, and as the days passed, the voices in his head grew louder. He said that these voices were warning him that he was in danger because the teenagers of Corona wanted to kill him. Joseph then decided to buy a gun to defend himself, and it was with that gun that he took the lives of Rylee and Anthony, allegedly at the command of the voices in his head. On July 31st, 5 days after the crime, doctors trying to save Anthony reported that he had suffered brain death and there was nothing more they could do. This news shocked not only the young man's family but also his fans, who followed him on social media. Despite everyone knowing how critical Anthony's condition was, they still held on to hope that he could be saved. According to some sources, Anthony was an organ donor, and some of his organs were donated to save the lives of others. A few days later, both Rylee's and Anthony's families came together to pay their last respects to the two young victims. The ceremony was deeply emotional and attended by hundreds of people. During his first hearing, Joseph Jimenez pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. His lawyer argued that he had schizophrenia and that, on the day of the crime, the defendant was mentally unbalanced. Because of this, authorities decided to send Joseph for tests to determine if he indeed suffered from any mental disorder. This led to the process dragging on for more than 2 years, only concluding in 2024. In February 2024, Joseph Jimenez Jr. stood trial. The defense's main argument remained the same, claiming that Joseph suffered from schizophrenia and, due to not taking his medication, experienced a mental imbalance. The tests performed on Joseph confirmed that he indeed suffers from this mental disorder, but evidence collected during the investigation revealed that he wasn't as mentally unstable on the day of the crime. The prosecution presented videos filmed by Joseph using his cell phone on the day of the crime, in which he displayed normal behavior. Furthermore, the prosecution argued that if the defendant had truly been mentally unbalanced on the day of the crime, he wouldn't have stolen Rylee's wallet after killing her. According to the prosecution, this act of stealing made it clear that he knew exactly what he was doing that day. A friend of Joseph, named Carlos Gonzalez, one of the friends who was with the defendant on the day of the crime, testified during the trial. According to Carlos, Joseph suddenly began acting strangely, and after showing the gun, he and the other friends became scared and decided to leave. Carlos said that if he had known what was going to happen, he would have tried to stop it in some way. At the end of the trial, the judge concluded that Joseph was sane on the day of the crime and was fully aware of his actions. As a result, Joseph Jimenez Jr. was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Currently, Joseph is incarcerated in a California state prison, where he will spend the rest of his life.